Jerry Mathers, how is this for a wow? Since 1957, Leave It to Beaver has not been off the air, has it?
Absolutely not. And it shows a lot of times every day. It used to show every day in the United States, but it still shows all over the world. And in a lot of places, smaller countries, it may be the first time people really get a look at what an American family is like.
But I mean, think of the statistics. It has screened and continues to do so in over 100 countries. And I was reading somewhere it might be in 91 languages, maybe even more.
Probably even more by now, because a lot of times when another country sees that the country next to it or whatever has American films, they go to those people and get them. So the fun part is I get all these letters now. A lot of them I can't even read because they're written in their language, but it all has something. And all of a sudden I see beaver and I go, oh, that's what this one's about.
You know, you think of the expression as American as apple pie. Well, you have to say there was nothing more wholesome in terms of American television than Leave It to Beaver.
Well, that was because the writers knew when we were making it in 1957, TV was fairly new, and a lot of places all over the world didn't really know how Americans lived. And Leave It to Beaver shows what an American family was, even though it was in the early 50s, and how they lived. And, you know, people would say, oh, okay, maybe we should work like that.
You think about your showbiz career. I mean, you were an entertainment veteran long before Theodore Beaver Cleaver came along. That's very true, isn't it? Because you were discovered, I think, when you were 2 years old in a Los Angeles department store.
And that's where I was discovered, because the lady was looking for a child and she couldn't find one for live TV for pet milk. And pet milk not only was a milk at that time, but it was also baby formula. So Ed Wynn was doing a show, and I'd come out every week and I'd start pulling on his cuff and I'd say, time for a commercial. And he'd go away, kids, you bother me. I said, no, this is a pet milk commercial. It's got to come on. So, and it was just a lot of fun. And that's how I actually started. And then I went on to movies, TV, Leave It to Beaver. We think that Leave It to Beaver is probably the longest running show in television history because it's never been off the air since 1957.
Your very first movie credit was a little tiny part in Son of Paleface with the late, great Bob Hope and Jane Russell. What do you remember of that movie, if anything at all?
Not a whole lot. I mean, that would be like saying, well, when you were in the first grade, what was the 12th week like?
Wouldn't have a clue.
That's about where I am too. You know, they were really nice people. I remember Bob Hope because I did other movies with him, and I also did some of his live shows. So I knew all these people. But when you say, you know, well, what did you do on that particular part? I have no idea.
Well, speaking of Bob, I'm wondering, Jerry, is this true? You were 7 when you starred with Bob Hope in a movie called The Seven Little Foys. Now, I read somewhere that a staged fire, meaning one that was meant to be happening in the movie, suddenly got completely out of control, and Bob Hope kind of saved your life.
Absolutely. It was, I can't remember the name of the theater. I think it was in Chicago or New York or someplace like that. But he was on stage, and the candles are what they used to have. They didn't have lights like we have electric, and the candles caught on fire. Well, they were going to redo that, and they thought they had it all ready to do, but it turned out to be a real fire. And suddenly Bob Hope and I were pretty much enclosed by flames, and he actually grabbed a jacket from a guy that threw it into him, and we jumped over the fire. And then about 4 hours later, we went back and did it again the right way.
Fantastic. That is incredible. What was the real Bob Hope like? What was the Bob Hope that you got to know like?
Very nice man. He was always joking around with me. And if I had a line, he'd say, no, wait a minute, Jerry, don't say it that way. And he'd tweak it a little bit, which actually made it a lot better. And I had more fun with him. I did several movies, and a lot of his live shows used to have, and I don't even remember what the name of it was, but a Bob Hope live show. And I do little weird things, walk on, say, it's time for a commercial. And he'd go away, kid. And I'd say, nope, you gotta get a commercial, go away.
I have to say, they don't make legends like that anymore, do they?
Just, more fun to be on the set with than almost anyone else I can ever imagine.
You starred in an Alfred Hitchcock movie, The Trouble with Harry. You played the son of Shirley MacLaine. And if I'm right, this was her movie debut, or certainly one of her earliest roles.
Absolutely. And I'd probably done, I can't even tell you how many before that. They weren't big parts, but whenever they needed a child, I was a lot of times the go-to person, because a lot of things that I did, they said, well, if he could do that, then he could do our show.
Was it difficult for you, Jerry, to be working in a movie, for instance, like The Trouble with Harry with the great Alfred Hitchcock? I mean, did you get a little nervous, or were you still at such an age that nerves weren't a thing?
Nerves weren't really a thing. And I mean, I will tell you this honestly, they very much, would come to me and say, do this, please. I mean, it wasn't like it was something that was hard to do. If I had to do it now, it'd be a lot harder. But as a child, that seemed easy. Go up and sit in this nice lady's lap, and she's going to pat your head a couple times, say these few lines, and I'll yell cut, and it's over. I said, well, I can do that.
Tell me what Shirley MacLaine was like.
Really nice. She was, it was kind of funny because she was a singer and a dancer, and she would always loosen up. And all of a sudden I'd be looking around and everybody else is working hard, and she's over in the corner grabbing on to they have these big beams, and she'd be kicking her legs up and just doing all sorts of stuff to exercise because she was so nervous working.
And of course, the master of suspense, one of the greatest directors of all time. What are your memories of working with Alfred Hitchcock?
And people would say, oh, you're working on a Hitchcock film. Well, be very careful around Mr. Hitchcock. Got there. He'd put me up on his knee and say, this is how I want it read, Jerry. He'd read it back to me by himself, and I just had to copy him. So he was somebody that at first I was thinking, after that, and when I was doing Leave It to Beaver, he was doing Alfred Hitchcock Presents one stage away. And if I went to lunch, he'd always come by and say hi or whatever. Nice man.
In 1957, your life would change forever when you think about it. You audition along with, I think, almost 2,000 other boys for assorted roles in an upcoming series called Leave It to Beaver.
As a matter of fact, it wasn't called Leave It to Beaver. It was called Wally and the Beaver at first. And I forget who it was. I think it was Remington Rand Typewriters liked Wally and the Beaver, not so much. So they changed it to Leave It to Beaver.
Well, it's interesting too, Jerry, because Leave It to Beaver was really the first show on American television that was centered around a child.
Right. They were mostly centered around the adults, and the children were just kind of add-ons to make them look like an American family. So it was a really good time. I went in there every day. We'd do the show, and I just had a great time. We had a great crew. They made sure that every person on the crew had at least 2 children. So they were used to being around kids.
Now, it's 66 years since it first went to air. Why do you think it is still so loved?
I think it's because kids are pretty much the same all over the world. They're always getting in a little trouble, and the parents come and talk to them and things. But it was just a really good show, and I think it was so realistic. The things that Beaver did were things that kids were doing. Sometimes they pushed the envelope a little bit too far, that it really wasn't what kids were doing. But for the most part, it was, each show was something that maybe a kid had done that day or last week. Or a lot of times I still meet people that say, when you did this, when that happened, I really did that. And that was before I saw the show.
Tony Dow, he played your older brother, Wally. Did you two bond immediately? Did you get on? Did you become great friends?
Not immediately, because he was quite a few years older than me, but he was always like, he was also an AAU swimming and diving champ. So he could do things like take 4 or 5 steps, jump up in the air and land on his feet. Mm-hmm. I knew I couldn't do that, but I wasn't around a whole lot of other people. There were children. I thought, gee, everybody else must be able to do that. What's wrong with me? He was a really great fella.
Now, Jerry, Leave It to Beaver was riding on a high throughout its 6th season. So question is, why did it end?
Writers and producers decided that they had a good stock of things, and we were getting a little tired. I mean, you have to realize that we were working, the kids at least, were working from 8 to 5 or 9 to 6, and that was 5 days a week. The adults were sometimes there till 9 or 10 or 11 o'clock at night because they'd have to go back and relight the things that the people had been, the adults had been with us in the show. So it was a good time to leave. We had enough that they could show almost one show a day and have it on for a whole year. There are 234 episodes over 6 years.
How did your schooling work? I mean, would you go to school after your day on the set? Did you have a tutor on the set? How did you wind up with an education while being a busy actor?
I had a private tutor, and they were from the LA Unified School District. But because Tony was in high school and I was in elementary school, we both had separate teachers. We also had our own place that we would go and study, and it was basically just an on-set place where it was very quiet. But that was our two schoolrooms. But he being in high school and me being in elementary school, they were very different. So we both had our own teacher. I'm a graduate of Berkeley, so it was a very, very good education.
You and Tony Dow did a lot of things after Leave It to Beaver. You would do shows together and countless personal appearances. So you were very close. His death last year of liver cancer, I can only imagine, Jerry, that must have really shaken you to the core.
Definitely. I mean, I knew he wasn't, my brother, but he was my very best friend for a very long time. And when we were on the set, there were really no other kids there most of the time. Now, other people may come in for 1 or 2 days, but Tony and I were there every day. Monday and Tuesday, we'd read the script together when no one else was there. And then the next 3 days, we'd shoot it. But, he was somebody that I just really liked. Well, we didn't really know he was unwell. We thought he just maybe had, a cold or all the different things that you would have. We didn't think it was anything that would be, life and death, but it was. And it happened very fast. He was one day doing the show with us, and then he basically started taking time off, and they took a lot of time off, and then he passed.
It was very quick. I think his family later said that he'd only been diagnosed in May of last year. And by July, so I mean, barely 2 months on, he was gone. And I know it was all quite a bit bizarre because his death had been announced and then his death was retracted, that he was still with us. And then the announcement came through that he'd actually died. So all of that must have been horribly upsetting for those who knew and loved him so dearly.
Very much so. But not luckily, but I did know that he had passed away. So I didn't know why all of a sudden people were saying that he hadn't. And that was what was shocking, because I had, been to the funerals and things like that. So it wasn't that I knew that he had passed. I'm thinking, why are they saying this? But, they just, some reporters someplace thought he hadn't passed.
Did you get the chance to visit him toward the end when then you realized that he had been very unwell and may not be with us for much longer?
I got to go to the hospital. He was bedridden, so it wasn't like he got up and, could even walk around or anything, but I got to talk to him, and it was, very nice. He said, well, what are you doing without me? How can you possibly get along without me? And I said, I don't know. It's very hard. But he was just a very nice guy, and, I always still miss him. He was just, a really good big brother. Funny part is he was the little brother in his family. I was the big brother in mine.
Wow. Let's talk about some of the other cast members. Hugh Beaumont, he had a fascinating life before Leave It to Beaver. Am I right in thinking that he was an ordained minister?
Ordained minister, but he was also Michael Shane, who is this really tough detective. And that used to be between movies. That was like the little thing that they show that's about a half hour. And Michael Shane was always taking people, grabbing them by this, pounding them up against the wall if he wanted information. So it wasn't really a good job for a preacher. But I think when he did Leave It to Beaver and he could be the father and take Beaver in there and talk to him, that was much more something he liked.
But he had so many feathers to his cap, didn't he, Jerry? I mean, he became a great screenwriter. He wrote screenplays and things. And I think somewhere in the midst of all of that, he also had a Christmas tree farm.
In Minnesota. But he had that since before he was on Leave It to Beaver. But yeah, and he'd always bring back to people in the crew and Tony and myself and Barbara a tree when he came back from Minnesota. And he put it in this big hauler that he had. And so we always had the best Christmas trees.
Barbara Billingsley. Now, there was somebody who just oozed total class. What are your memories of having Barbara Billingsley as your TV mum?
Just a really nice lady that, was very, very strict with us. She said, and she meant it. This is a job. You're here. I'm here. We're going to do it. Then we can fool around. But when we're on the set, we're working. And Tony and I didn't really, I mean, we knew that, but she really laid it out. And it was just fun. We had a great time. Everybody that was on the set, the cameramen, lighting people, all had kids so that they knew, what kids could do. And, it was just a really good time. I had a wonderful time doing the show.
She was one of the great stars, Did she give you and Tony any advice, any tips on how to deliver a line or how to kind of hit your mark? Was she very hands-on in helping your career during your run on Leave It to Beaver?
She was, but only because she didn't like to do it more than one or two times. So you had to really know what your lines were. And but as far as telling us and doing them a certain way or things like that, no. But she came in there, she knew every line, she knew every one of your lines. So if you missed one and they cut it, she'd say, Jerry, you didn't say it right. This is how this line's supposed to be. And I go, oh yeah, now I remember. And we'd do it over again.
Or she might say this, Jerry, hell's bells.
That was her famous thing. Whenever something went very, very wrong, you knew that it was wrong because Barbara would yell that and the whole crew would go, what's wrong? Uh-oh, something's really wrong.
Leave It to Beaver, of course, one of the most popular shows on television at the time. What was that level of fame like? I mean, were you literally mobbed by people?
Not mobbed, but they were very, very nice people. A lot of times, like if we were in a restaurant, people would come up and say, well, aren't you the Beaver? And I'd say yes. And they say, well, my children, and they're all here, say hi to Jerry or say hi to the Beaver. So it was just something that I grew up with it. I mean, it was something that I, from the time I was basically 7, was living with all the time. So it wasn't any big deal. I mean, it wasn't like they were offensive to me in any way.
So after Leave It to Beaver, you then got for a bit a normal life and you worked in banking, you worked in property development, you mentioned. You even got together a catering company, didn't you?
I did all sorts of things and it was really fun. It was something that I'd never thought I'd do, but the opportunities just came by. People that were friends of mine were saying, I'm going to start this. Would you like to come along with me? And I said, sure, that sounds easy. And a lot of it was a lot of hard work, but it was really fun.
You also made your debut on Broadway in a fabulous version of Hairspray. I think that was about 2007. What was that like, Jerry? Did you wind up with a tummy full of nerves before the curtain went up for the first time?
Of course, you always do because you're on Broadway, and that's, like the pinnacle of working as an actor. But I had been doing live TV and also stage plays all over the country. Dinner theater is what I was doing. So it wasn't like it was something I had never done. And it was, I wasn't worried about doing it because the other things I'd done were pretty much just the same. Everybody was so nice and I'd go out and sign autographs after. And we did standing room only for the whole time I was there. So that was something that my fans just really came out, and I never expected that. And we'd go to restaurants after and have a nice dinner, come back the next day, and maybe some of the same people would come and watch it again.
Looking back over your 72-year career and counting, might I say, you are a child star who was unscathed. You hear so much about child stars and terrible things that befall them. It might be they lose all of their money or they wind up with a whole bunch of issues, drugs, drink, whatever else it might be. That didn't happen to you, did it? I mean, you just pirouetted through your life and continued to work and didn't seem to suffer that child star curse, as some people like to term it.
Well, that was pretty much put out immediately for me because of what my father did. He was a vice principal and then principal, and then he worked with the whole school system. And so he knew kids very, very well. He knew what was going on in my life. And so while other kids were out doing things, he'd have me studying or doing a show or whatever. But he was really a big help in my life.
In the 90s for you, Jerry, there was a health scare. Tell me what happened.
Well, I found out that I was starting diabetes and I didn't really realize it, but I thought I was just having a great time. I was eating a lot of foods that I shouldn't have been. I was getting very overweight, and I have a very good friend that is a doctor, and she kept telling me, "Why don't you come in for a physical?" I said, "I feel great. I don't need one." But she, by looking at me, could tell that I was off the boat, so to speak. And so finally, for Christmas, she gave me a free exam, and she said, if you want to live a few more years, it's going to be okay, but you're not going to make the long train because this diabetes that you have. I said, what? She said, yes, you've got diabetes. You can, by changing your eating habits and you're, going to bed a little earlier maybe and getting a lot more exercise, you can definitely, slow it way down, but you've got diabetes.
Since then, you've become, I suppose, an advocate for diabetes. So you would have, over the years now, spoken to hundreds of thousands of people in the same boat that you were in.
Absolutely. And it was something that I thought was very, very good because I needed someone to tell me that. And I realized that a lot of people wouldn't have it. And a lot of them were my fans and good friends. And so it was something that I could do for them.
Sitting next to you now, Jerry, is somebody very special to you, and that is your third wife. They say a third time is the charm, and I can see that smile on your face. Hello, Teresa.
Hi, how are you?
Oh, it's so lovely to see you. How did you two meet?
Our sisters lived in the same neighborhood and they raised their kids together.
And they were pretty much best friends.
Right. And they knew that I have experience behind the camera as far as production, and of course, Jerry in front of the camera. And they said, you two just have to get together. We know it's going to work.
Well, I kicked it around for a while because anybody your sister wants you to go out with, you just kind of say, well, I don't know about that. But then I took her out, and after that, I was a done deal.
Were you, Teresa, a great fan of Leave It to Beaver? Do you remember it as a little girl sitting in front of that telly, and there was Jerry as a little boy inside that television set?
Absolutely. And people ask me now, they go, did you ever think that you were going to marry, Jerry Mathers, the Beaver? I said, well, not really then, but I'm so happy, and we just have a great life together.
So, Jerry, tell me, how did you propose?
You want to marry me?
No, he did not. He did get down on one knee, and I hadn't been married before, so it was very special. And we kind of knew that we're going to be doing this, and we got our family together so they could see it, and everybody was just like, oh, they were so excited. So it made it even more special for us.
It was a very good time for us. Still is.
Yeah.
And so how many years of wedded bliss now?
12 years.
12 years.
We have 5 grandchildren under the age of 7, and they all live within 7 miles of us.
Yes.
So we feel very blessed with them, and spending time with the family is very important.
Family is very important to both of us.
Now, Jerry, years ago, and it's nice to be able to clear things up, isn't it? There was a rumor that you'd actually passed away during the Vietnam War, which kind of makes our conversation now in 2023 a little intriguing.
Somebody probably that was an anti-war person, I don't know how much you know about the war, but somebody had said we're losing all the youth of America, and even Jerry Mathers of Leave It to Beaver. And so the papers picked that up, and it went all over the country, and people sent my mom and dad condolence cards. And you can get up and say it didn't happen, but it takes a lot to drown something like that.
We also heard a couple different stories, and another one was also that maybe somebody with a name similar to Jerry passed, and they just took that up right away. So we don't really know how it happened, but
it did.
Yeah, but it is a big rumor that happened for sure.
In any event, you're not a hologram. You live and you breathe and you're real and you're alive. And that's the best thing.
That's the best thing. Absolutely.
So, Jerry, for you now, are there some things on your career bucket list that you'd like to tick off? Would you like to do another movie? Would you like to do another stage play? What about another television series? Where are those things sitting with you at the moment?
Well, I'd like to do any of those, but the thing is, a lot of them just are things that people come to me with that I'm not really interested in. So it has to be something that I feel would have some kind of reaction that I'd want for my fans to see. because a lot of times people want me to play against character. They say, oh, this would be so funny because they wouldn't expect you to do this. Well, they don't have to because I'm not doing it.
Now, with all the travel all over the world you've done, there's somewhere that you haven't been to, and hopefully that might be happening later this year. That's to Australia. You've never been here, have you?
One of the places that am really looking forward to going to is Australia. And yes, I've been all over the world, but never to Australia. And it's not that I didn't like it, because I just never had the chance really to go.
Gee, it's lovely to chat with you, Jerry, and it's so lovely to see you two again, Teresa. I've got to say, it's nice to finish on such a beautiful, upbeat note, and that is 12 years of wedded bliss, and look at the two of you smiling there. Who says those Hollywood marriages don't last?
Our pleasure.
I was
Nice
going
to
to say
talk
we
with you.
laugh a lot, and that makes a big difference in our relationship. It's great.
Look, my best to you, and I can't wait to see you both real soon. Bye.